Okay, thank you, guys. Let me begin today by asking all of us a question. Have any of us ever thought that when we have asked God for something in prayer, that maybe he was not listening to us? Probably all of us have done that. I have titled this sermon, Does God Answer Prayers? Part 2. In part 1, we saw that God does answer prayers, sometimes with yes, sometimes with no, and sometimes not at all. Now, with that in mind, if you would, please go with me to Psalm 81. In Psalm 81, we're going to read and see where God's people would not listen to God. Brother, even reading these verses is very sad. But let's go to Psalm 81. We're going to begin in verse 11. Psalm 81, verse 11. But my people would not hearken to my voice, and Israel would none of me. So I gave them up into their own heart's lust, and they walked in their own counsels. Oh, that my people had hearkened unto me, and Israel had walked in my ways. And then in verse 14, he tells us something very, very important. I should have soon subdued their enemies and turned my hand against their adversaries. He's telling us that Israel wouldn't listen to him. They wouldn't hearken. They wouldn't walk in his ways. But he also says that unto them, and certainly unto us, that he would soon subdue our enemies and he would turn his hand against our adversaries if we would listen to him, if we would follow his counsel and not our own. Brethren, what we see very clearly through the pages of the Bible, and we can see examples of this throughout Old and New Testament, that Israel did not listen to God's teachings, nor did they pay any attention to his counsel. They turned against him and they followed their own stubborn hearts and their own way of doing things. Because you see, brethren, we remember and we know this, that God told Israel through his commandments not to bow down to other gods. Yet they did not listen to him. And instead of listening to him, they worshiped idols, even though God had told them not to do so. They chose to follow their own ways instead of God's ways. Let's go to 2 Kings 17. 2 Kings 17, verse 12. 2 Kings 17 and verse 12. For they served idols whereof the Lord had said unto them, you shall not do this thing. He said, don't do this. Don't do this. And of course, we know what happened to the nation of Israel. They divided into two different nations, one north and one south, and the northern kingdom in 722 BC went into a captivity. The Assyrian army then destroyed them, and they were wiped out, and they were not to be a nation any longer. Go to 2 Kings 17 and verse 5. We begin 2 Kings 17, 5. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria. Samaria was the capital of the northern kingdom, and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria. Dropping on into verse 7. For So it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the statutes of the heathen whom the Lord cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. So, brethren, it's very plain just through these very few couple of scriptures we've seen, we can very clearly see that Israel did not listen to God. They did not follow his will. Therefore, God allowed the Assyrian army to defeat and to destroy them. A very powerful lesson that we can simply state and learn from that is, brethren, God greatly wants to be listened to. He does not want us to turn our deaf ear to his instructions. Here, let me give you 2 bullets, 2 points. The first one is he expects us to hear what he has to say. And the second one is he expects us to follow what he is saying. He wants us to hear it, and then he wants us to do it. So with that in mind, let's see 2 major points on listening to God.